Good morning. Today's date is March 13th, 2007. My name is Thomas Murray. Today I am conducting an oral history interview with Donald Kwasnowski for the Veterans History Project. This interview is being conducted at the Dalton Community Television Studio in Dalton, Massachusetts, in association with the Dalton Council on Aging. Good morning, Don.
Good morning.
Could you give us your full name, spelling your last name?
Donald Kwasnowski, Kwasniowski.
And where do you presently live?
Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
And what is your date of birth?
November 4th, 1924.
And where were you born, Don?
Adams, Massachusetts.
Now tell us about that. You were...
Well, I was the 14th kid in the family, so it's quite a treat. There's only 8 of us out of the 14 that grew up to adulthood. 6 of them died when they were young, just barely born.
Now, did you grow up and go to school there?
Yes, I did. I went to school, my first 3 grades at the Maple Grove School in Adams, Massachusetts. Then I went to Commercial Street, Adams, Massachusetts, for the next 4 years. And then I graduated from there and I went down to the Plunkett Junior High School in Adams, Massachusetts.
And what was it like growing up during that period?
It was tough. The Depression was on, and you didn't get too much. Actually, the parents didn't have too much to give their kids at them days. It's not like it is today.
And with the 14, you were the youngest,
I was the youngest. There were 7 boys and 7 girls born, and 4 boys lived and 4 girls lived to adulthood. The others died shortly after they were born from things like pneumonia. They didn't have no cure for it. Pneumonia in them days was like cancer was today.
And your mom and dad were immigrants, right?
Yes, they came from Poland around 1901. They were married February 6, 1902, and my oldest brother was born November 14th of that year.
And you mentioned your dad did become a citizen.
He became a citizen. He was a staunch Democrat. He was a hard worker. He could do anything. He built a beautiful house for us. We had the nicest house on the street, actually. He was a hard worker. My mother worked 20 hours a day, I think. She milked cows, cut hay. Oh, she was tremendous.
Now, you did a little work, too, when you were younger, didn't you?
Yeah, when I was young, I got a job. I had a paper route, 31 customers. And if I was late one night or something for delivering the papers, they used to ask me if I was peddling the Saturday Evening Post, but it was a North Adams Transcript at that time. And it was tough. And then I got a job on the farm up the street from where I lived on Elger Street in Adams. And it was something. I milked cows at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd get home about 7:30, 8 o'clock. I'd have to get washed up so I could go to school. And when I got out of school at 3 o'clock, I'd rush up to there and take care of the chickens and feed them and everything for them. And then I'd have to milk cows at night. And on weekends, Saturday and Sunday, I helped on the milk route. That's where I learned to drive when I was 16 years old. So I had a full beginning.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned you did have the brothers and sisters that...
There's 4 brothers and 4 sisters.
That lived,
your 4 brothers and 4 sisters that lived to adulthood.
What did your dad do for a living?
He worked in the textile mills in Adams, cotton mills. And he did some carpentry work with people. He was very handy.
And you mentioned that you lived on a pretty good sized plot of land.
They owned 4.5 acres. They bought an old rundown house that they tore down right away. It was 4.5 acres there, and he built a house, beautiful house there.
And you had cows and,
We had 3 cows, up to 3 cows at any one time. Rabbits, guinea pigs, you name it, and we had it.
and he also liked to tend a garden, didn't he?
We grew all our vegetables, and we had a hay field there too, so we got enough hay for the cows for the winter. Almost all winter. They'd have to probably buy baled hay later in the spring. But we had about 2 acres of cow pasture, we called it. It was nice. It was beautiful.
Now, was he a veteran?
No,
No.
no,
Now, did you graduate from high school?
no. I quit when I was 16 years old because it was tough.
Yeah. Do you remember what year that was then?
Let's see, I was born in 24. That's about 1940 when
About
I got out.
1940. And what did you do after you quit school?
I went and worked in the Berkshire Mills in Adams. And where did I go from there?
Well, you mentioned a metal shop or
Well, I
something.
was sheet metal. I did some sheet metal work in the Cheshire Harbor. And I don't know where else I went to after that.
It was a laundry, wasn't it?
While I was working at the sheet metal place, there was L.A. Weston, that was it, not the one in the harbor. That was in Adams, Massachusetts. And somebody told me that Archie Poirier, who owned the Adams Laundry, was looking for help, so they called him in. He knew who I was, so he gave me a job. I worked there until I went into the service.
Do you remember what you did there?
Yeah, I was assembling clothes at first, and then later on got a route.
Uh-huh.
I drove a truck and picked up clothes.
Now, were you drafted or?
I was drafted. When I became 18 years old, I had to sign up. And shortly after that, 4 months after that, I was in the Army. I went down to Camp Wheeler, Georgia. I went to Fort Devens first. And from Fort Devens, they shipped me down to Camp Wheeler, Georgia for 13 weeks of basic training. They did it in 11 weeks, so.
Yeah.
And then we got shipped out.
Now, you were still 18 at this time, weren't you?
Yeah.
When you got
Yeah.
drafted.
When I got drafted, I was
And what were your dates of service?
date of service.
Yeah.
I went in, I think, the 22nd of April, 1946. No, 1940.
I think it was 43.
1943.
Yeah. And then you get out in, what was the date you get out?
January 31st, 1946.
So you were, did you go to Springfield for your induction?
I went to Springfield, and from Springfield I went into Fort Devens.
Okay. Uh-huh. And you went to Camp Wheeler for your.
Camp Wheeler.
Do you remember any of your experiences there? You mentioned one about Bob Hope coming to.
Oh, when we were in Camp Wheeler, every so often they used to bring celebrities in for the troops to enjoy.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing going at that time was Bob Hope. You know, I was so happy we were going to see Bob Hope. So the day he came in, we were quarantined. Somebody had to stay back in the barracks.
Oh.
They couldn't leave anything unguarded, and it had to be the platoon I was in. And I could hear him in the distance laughing and roaring. I was a little upset, but hey, somebody had to do it.
Yeah. Now, do you remember any of the training that you got?
Training, we had plenty of training. No, I can't think what I was doing at that time.
Well, you mentioned a lot of discipline and that type of training that they do in boot camp.
Oh,
And your hikes.
I went on 25-mile hikes. Oh, we had to run a lot. We're in good shape.
The typical boot camp training.
Yeah, yeah,
And you qualified then as a rifleman?
yep. I was
Was it hard for you to adjust to this new life?
not too hard. I was always told what to do when I was home, so it was very easy. Being the last one, so.
Now, you mentioned, how long was boot camp?
I was 13 months, 11 months, and 13 weeks in boot camp.
Do you remember the day you graduated? Did they have any ceremonies that you remembered, or?
I can't recall.
Okay. Now, did you go home after boot camp, or?
Yeah, I don't remember whether I went right home after boot camp or not. No, after boot camp, I was shipped all over the country.
What was the first place you went?
After I left Camp Wheeler,
You mentioned Fort Meade.
I went to Fort Meade, Maryland. And while I was in Fort Meade, I had a big brother that was in the regular Army already for 10 or 12 years. He was a staff first sergeant at the Army War College in Washington, D.C., which was right next door to Camp Meade. So he come down with his wife to see me, and somehow he got me in his outfit. So I was transferred over to the Army War College, and that was a big thing going during the war, because all the brass that the young soldiers were going in that had college experience were going up to the War College and doing Army work. But my brother Frank, he wasn't known as sergeant. He was known as Duke. Even the company commander called him Duke. Everybody called him Duke. Of course, he had a lot of experience in the Army, and a lot of those officers and that were just made to that because it was the beginning of the war. And he had to show them the ropes.
Yeah.
He was terrific. He was a great marksman with the rifle. He could make it talk.
Now, you said he was known all over the country for that.
There was a piece in the papers all over the country, and they showed different guys. Like there was I looked for this at home before I came here, and I couldn't find it. The fighter was Fox was his name, and he was big, and they had him on there. They had my brother there because he was in the contest with the pistol, and he got 218 points out of 220, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
So.
Now, you mentioned he could be heard all over the base, too.
Oh, heard. He'd give those fellows going up to the War College for the day. He'd get them in the morning, and you could hear them yelling and screaming. Calisthenics up in the War College. They could hear them up there just as good as we could down there. And the biggest thing trouble he had was with me, because he didn't want anybody to think he was favoring me. In the first 8 weeks I was there, I had 1 week on KP duty, and the next week I had the latrine duty, and it went like that for 8 weeks. And everybody felt sorry for me. A lot of them helped me and everything else, but he just didn't want to let anybody think he was going to let me get away with anything, which was nice.
Yeah. Now, you helped him out eventually with training, too, didn't you?
Yeah, well, then one morning he pulled me out of the ranks and he said, "You drill this company now." So I got out and judging from the way he ran it, I did pretty good. Matter of fact, I did so good, Major Miller, the company commander, promoted me to corporal.
Wow.
So that's where I got my first 2 stripes. And then I kept those 2 stripes till I went overseas, and then I had to have my stripes taken away because they couldn't bring in raw recruits and expect people that have been fighting for a year or 2 to take orders from somebody that was green. So I got my stripes back later. Matter of fact, I got 4 stripes.
Yeah. But now, during that time, you were there for about 6 months, you said?
Yeah.
And then you went home for a while.
For furlough, yeah. And then I went overseas.
Well, how was it like going home, though? Was it?
Oh, it was nice.
Yeah.
It was nice. Yeah, it was a treat.
And then from there, you mentioned you went to Texas.
I went to Texas. I was down there in Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. It was quite a treat. That's where the river ran through the city. It was the prettiest river in the United States, they claim. That's when they wrote the song, I met her by the river of the roses, sweetest girl this side of the Alamo. It was quite a thing then. And so after I got married, I told my wife I'd like to take her down and show her where the water ran through San Antonio. We couldn't find it.
Oh.
They disbanded it, and they just
Changed
made, yeah, they had it full of roses, full of flowers.
Now, from Texas, you went to Tennessee?
Tennessee, was there about three months, and that's when they dropped the 82nd Airborne jumped over into France down at across the English Channel. That was quite a thing. So then they shipped us around.
Now, it was here you decided to go into the paratroopers.
Yeah, well, I figured if I stayed in the paratroopers, I'd have to go for training and make some jumps. I'd have a good 4 or 5 weeks that I could get more training. So that's what I did. And it was tough because on the 4th week, well, first week you did 8 hours of calisthenics a day.
Uh-huh.
And that
Now,
was
where
rough.
was that? Where did you go for your paratrooper training?
That was in Fort Benning, Georgia.
And you said that was around 8 weeks, was it? Or
8
was it
weeks,
8
yep.
weeks?
Yeah, it was quite a treat.
Now-
Then we had to make 5 jumps on the last week, 1 every day. And then in them days, you used to have to pack your own chute. We were scared to. But if you ever seen the riggers packing them up where they just push them in with a paddle, you'd swear they were going to tear open, but those chutes were made out of something that was stronger than steel, I think. So we enjoyed it very much.
Now, you mentioned the training was tough there.
Oh, that was a bit pitiful.
Yeah. And you told a story about this commander flipping your sergeant. They were doing some...
Yeah. They were telling us one day they're going to teach us 2 things that day. We all said, what's that? And they said, they're going to teach you how to kill and how to keep from getting killed. So we had to pay attention. So the commanding officer there showed a couple of ways of throwing people down on the ground. So we had one instructor that nobody liked because he was rough. So the senior officer threw him down in a second. And everybody roared, they were happy. So he said, would you like to see that again? Everybody said yes. So he flipped him again. So the next morning we're going out for our 15-mile run. And we had 880 some odd people in the class. So he took us out. He said, I'll take this one today. So he's getting even with us. So he double timed us for the 15 miles. And well, When I got to the end, there was only 8 of us left, and if I had to go another step, I think there'd been 7 left. I know. But well, it's all learning how to take care of things, I guess.
So after you did your last jump, that was a night jump.
That
you
was a
mentioned.
night jump. Yeah, that was the easiest jump of the bunch.
Was it? Yeah.
But there's one thing I forgot to mention, though. We had a big fella, I can't remember his name, but he came from somewhere around Boston. He wanted to be a paratrooper so bad it was pitiful. And he was about 6'2", strappy, must have weighed about 184, all muscle. And he used to holler at us and just get moving and moving. But he wanted to be a paratrooper so bad. So when we went up to make our first jump, he was in line to be the first one out the door. He got up there and they got him over to the door, and he froze in the door. He couldn't jump. 3 sergeants that were jump sergeants there trying to pull him out and throw him out, because people freeze there, they throw him out, and then the minute they got out the door, they'd come to right away.
Yeah.
But they couldn't get him out. He was so strong, hanging on. So I had to pass him when I went out the door, and the others did too. We all got out. We got down on the ground. We had to roll up our chutes to bring him back to pack him over for the next jump. When we got back to camp, we see that fella. He had his luggage with him. He was waiting to be shipped out. So I don't know where he went from there.
Yeah.
But it was really pitiful, because he wanted to be a paratrooper so bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he got scared, and I suppose fear does that.
Yeah. Yeah. So after your last jump, then you got your wings.
We got our wings the next day, and then we were shipped out. Went up to Camp Shanks, I think it was.
Now, you'd mentioned you went home then too, didn't
Yeah,
you?
for 3 days or something like that. But couldn't have any more time than that, so it wasn't bad, because I could take the train from New York City and come right up to Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
They used to call that the milk run. But I got home for 3 days, and then I went back and I went overseas.
And when you left, your mother was pretty.
Oh, my mother, the day I went in the Army, I'll never forget it. I never seen my mother cry so much in all my life. And she was a woman that worked 20 hours a day, I think.
Yeah.
She'd set her clock every night. She had a clock with the luminous dial on it. She'd set it to ring off at 4:30 or something. Nobody ever heard the clock go off. She'd get up before it went off.
Yeah.
She'd go out, she'd milk cows, she made everybody's breakfast. She was a tough woman, beautiful. Everybody in the community loved her.
Now, from home, you went right to New York City, didn't you, to pick up your ship?
Yeah,
To-
yeah. No, I went to Fort Devens, back to Fort Devens before I went overseas.
Oh, okay.
And then we went over.
And what was the ship you went over on? Do you remember?
There was the Aquitania. I think it was a British ship. It was a monster ship. But I got a kick out of it, because it took us about 4 or 5 days to go across the ocean, because they had to watch out for mines or anything else. And I used to get a kick out of listening to some of the English talk, because they had that brogue.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember how one of us there, and all they were talking about somebody, and he says, "Well, that dirty lousy toit." We laughed so much, it was pitiful. Good memories and bad, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that's when they took your stripes away, wasn't it? When
Yeah,
you-
I was reduced without prejudice, but they didn't want a soldier going over there, green,
Right.
trying to give orders to a guy that's probably been in combat for a year or so.
Yeah.
But I got him back shortly after that, when I proved I could do my job. No.
Do you remember much else about the trip?
What is?
Just that you were scared, you mentioned, and
Oh, I was scared. Everybody was scared. You just didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember a few incidents, like when we got finished in Belgium. We went in, across the western part of Germany, getting over by the Rhine River, where we had to dig in. We had to get in foxholes for 2-3 days.
before you did that, though, Don, you landed in England, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When you
Before we went down to the English, down to the, not trying to think.
well, you went to La Farge, you mentioned.
Le Havre,
France.
that's where we
And then you were
crossed.
transported up to.
Belgium.
Now, was that? Was that by truck or?
Yeah, by truck and then walking, more or less.
Yeah.
They didn't want too much being bunched together because one shell would get you all.
Yeah.
So. it was
Now you mentioned
stressing.
when you got there that you were getting ready to jump the Rhine River.
Yeah, we were supposed to jump the Rhine River, and it was bad weather at that time, and they couldn't jump the first day. And second day, it was still a little windy, but the commanding Colonel Tucker said he's going to try it. He says, if I can try it, my men will jump it. So he jumped it. And, oh, it was a strong wind. You couldn't hardly steer yourself out of the wind's way. Mm-hmm. But they had to know, because we did that was when the United States came out with a new chute. See, when we first went in there, you have to buckle up. It take you about 10 minutes to get it buckled up, because you got to buckle you up strong so the chute wouldn't come off. Mm-hmm. And when they landed on the ground, the troopers were getting killed, shot by the enemy, because they couldn't get out of their chutes. Mm-hmm. So they come out with that new chute where you buckle up before you got in the plane, and you turn the dial a quarter of a turn so it wouldn't pop open on the way down. Mm-hmm. So when you landed, all you did is took that dial and moved it a quarter of an inch backward and slap it, and the fourth buckles came right off immediately. Yeah. So that saved a lot of life. Yeah. That was great. Just got to remember, when you're in the air, don't turn that dial.
So, did you ever jump the Rhine, or?
No, we didn't have to, because they gave up fast. Mm-hmm. And then the war more or less was coming to an end. Mm-hmm. And we seen the prisoners coming from miles away with their hands on their heads, coming down the street. Our job was just to see that they weren't pulling anything on us. Mm-hmm. And
now, you said you had become a BAR man.
I was a Browning automatic rifleman. That was my job. And that was the BAR. It was 18 pounds weighed. And if you had the tripod on, it was 21 pounds, and we had to jump with that. Mm-hmm. It was tough. Yeah. And then plus all the rest of the gear on you for your ammunition and everything.
It must have been a hard landing.
It was a hard landing, but everything went off good. Yeah. But I was lucky. I got 39 combat days to my credit, but I didn't see the kind of serious fighting that the previous men had gone through. Mm-hmm. I was lucky in that respect. But of course, regardless, even if there's only one guy out there, who the hell knows who's going to get it?
Yeah. And you mentioned you thought it was a Frenchman was trying to get back.
Oh yeah, I had charge because I was a sergeant then, and I had a group out there, and we heard somebody coming across the field at night, and it was dark, and he was talking French, so I radioed back to camp that to send. I can't remember the guy's name, but I knew he could speak good French, so I asked him to send him out. So he sent him out, and well, all in all, we had a minefield out there. Like during the war, I think it's a Geneva Convention, stated that if you laid a mine out, and you had to mark them off so the enemy know that there's mines there, and it takes longer to get through. Mm-hmm. You're not just going to run through, you're going to clear the minefield as best you can. So this guy yelled out in French. I knew he was talking French. I couldn't speak French, but I knew what French was. Mm-hmm. So when he come out there, he talked to him, and I had to tell him, just keep walking towards us. So he came walking towards us, and all of a sudden he stepped on a mine and tripped it up, and I seen the mine come up and hit him in the head. Poor guy was laid there for the rest of the night, moaning and moaning. We couldn't go get him because we didn't know where the mines were.
Yeah, yeah.
So there was nothing we could do.
Yeah, yeah.
And he died overnight, and it was 2 days before we were breaking up and to cross the Rhine, and they went over and got him up. And the poor guy just puffed up to the size, about 4 times his size.
Yeah.
It was pitiful to see. Yeah. Some things you'll never forget.
Now after that, you met up with the Russians, didn't you?
Yeah, we met the Russians. And then they dropped a bomb over in Hiroshima, was it?
Yeah.
And these Russian soldiers thought that was the greatest thing ever going. I was more scared when I met the Russians than I did when I met the Germans.
They were a pretty tough bunch.
They were a tough bunch.
Yeah.
Well, they never had too much, and they were rough.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that this is where you saw the German prisoners. Thousands of them.
Then I seemed more like millions. And all I could think of when seeing him come down the road, one in back of the other, almost touching each other, and they all got their hands on their heads, so we could see that they didn't have nothing. And I was just thinking of all the guys of our men that passed away that would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah.
Because it was quite a show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. I can still to this day see him coming down the road.
Yeah.
Can still remember it.
Yeah.
And with them, some women were coming down with them too because they lived there.
Yeah.
And then we got after that. I didn't have enough points to come home, so they told me I had to go to Berlin for the Army of Occupation, and the 82nd Airborne had charge of it. So our general was there, Jim Gavin. He was one of the greatest generals in the Army. He was tough, good. I seen him come up to foxholes where we were with a carbine rifle on his shoulder. And he'd holler at us, don't salute me, don't salute me. They didn't want the enemy to see anybody saluting him.
Yeah.
But he was great.
Now you mentioned when you got to Berlin, it was the rubble and everything.
Oh, from the constant bombing that the United States and England had done over a course of a long stretch. There must have been 8, 10, 15 feet of rubble in the streets. You couldn't walk down the street. There was no street. It was all rubble. And when we got there, inside of 3 months, the street was beautiful. They had the bricks all cleaned off and piled up on the sidewalk. All the sand and cement was swept up and taken off
Yeah.
to the dumps. We had parade going on, eight abreast, and we could have had more abreast, but we didn't have enough soldiers. But that's how good. I never seen a bunch of people like the German people over there working and to clean up.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you, if you have a good leader, you'll have a good country.
Yeah.
And they evidently didn't have a good leader.
Now, how did you live over there? Was it in a barracks? Or?
Yeah, it wasn't a barracks. We had different places to stay. Sometimes some hotels and buildings, and but
Now,
it was
you
great.
became an MP, wasn't it, over there? Is that what you're...
No, I was gonna be an MP back in the States before I went over.
Oh.
That was down in Fort Meade, not Fort Meade, but outside of, yeah,
Memphis, wasn't it?
no, in next to Baltimore, near Washington D.C.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, that was me. That's when I was going to become a combat MP, but my brother got me in his outfit.
Oh, okay.
So,
what did you have to do over there while you were there?
well, we had to patrol. We had to patrol people and make sure that nobody had anything going that was going to disrupt anything. So we had to be on our toes.
And you had a certain section? And,
Yeah, we had a certain section. Like, I was in the western part of Berlin. I was facing France, and the Russians had the eastern. They had the eastern part of Germany to guard, and we all took care of it. It all worked out beautiful.
Now, you got to go out on your time off and see the bars and those type of things?
Oh yeah, we were given time to once in a while to get a couple hours off. And they let us go out. We'd get a beer or something,
Yeah.
but not too much. They didn't want us to fraternize too much. Our job was to see that everything was going straight.
Now, eventually you did come up on points.
I didn't have enough to go home when the war ended. That's why I got to go to Berlin.
Right.
But all along, this was after the New Year started, '46, in January. They told us that our 82nd Airborne Division was going to come home to the States, and we're going to put a parade on for all the services.
No.
So
So you went to England, didn't you?
yeah, to get back home.
And what
So-
ship
so
did you come back home
We come
on?
back on the Queen Mary. So we come back on the Queen Mary. That was a beautiful ship. Got down to Camp Shanks, got ready. Got the biggest meal of our lifetime, I think, there. Oh, you could eat, if you could eat 3 steaks, they gave you 3 steaks. And we hadn't been eating that good. That was great. And let's see, from there,
So there you prepared for the parade?
we were prepared for the parade. There was something I was just thinking of, and it just slipped my mind. It's heck, I guess the older you get, the slower your mind works. But what was I thinking? Mention something that you just told me.
Well, you came back to Camp Shanks.
Yeah.
You prepared for the parade,
Right.
and you went into New York City, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was in New York City. Went to we were gonna march from the 1st Street to 80th Street. That's approximately 4 miles. So the morning of the parade, they brought a big limousine for Gentleman Jim. Jim Gavin, our general. And they told him he could have this limousine to ride in. He says, I walked from Africa to Berlin. He said, you're not going to get me to ride the last 4 miles. He says, I'll walk with my men. He wanted to go over to the Pacific coast, and because the war hadn't been over at that time, he wanted to be known as Jungle Jim. We got a kick out of that, but it all ended after that.
Now that was quite a thing for you, wasn't it? That parade was.
Oh yeah, that was fantastic. I was lucky. I was on the right end. I could see out the corner of my eyes all the people throwing kisses and clapping and cheering us on, and just had a good feeling.
Yeah, I bet.
Just something you remember the rest of your life.
Yeah. And after the parade, where did you go then?
We got the following day. We got dispersed.
Mm-hmm.
We got out. They give us $100 of mustering out pay. You see, at that time, that when you got out of the army, you had 3 months of mustering out. Mm-hmm. When you got home, each 2 months, first and second month after you got out, you still got your $100
Wow.
for a start. So.
Now, where were you discharged from?
I was sent to Fort Meade. Camp Devens, I mean, from.
Okay.
And took the train back to Pittsfield. Mm-hmm. And I had somebody pick me up. My brother picked me up. It was fantastic. I'll never forget.
Now, when you got home, I imagine everyone was glad to see you.
Oh, yeah. It was a reunion. It's the happiest I've seen my mother in a long time.
Yeah.
Because her little boy was home.
Now, did you go back to work?
I went back to the laundry at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed there until, let's see, I was 46. It was in the early 50s, I guess I got out before I went in the next place to work in GE. I went to the GE for 4 months in 56, and that's when they had the big layoff. They had 10,000 people working there or something. There was only about 1,000 left. Everybody got out. And I couldn't get back when they started calling the people back to work in the GE because I didn't have the service. Mm-hmm. You had to have 10 years to get first class. Because that was a great thing here in Pittsfield, that GE.
Yeah. So where did you go to work after that? Was it?
Let's see. I wound up later on in the best of abilities. I went to the Canteen Vending Company. Mm-hmm. That was a good paying job, the best paying job I ever had. And I was there for 9.5, almost 10 years. And then that's when they started laying people off. And they laid me off because business went down. And I didn't have as much service as some of the others. And they told me just as soon as it picked up or anything, I'd be called back. And things are picking up. They didn't call me back. But they hired 2 kids to drive the trucks around that were 21 years of age. And I went and complained about it, and nothing was done about it. So I went to see a lawyer, see if I could get my job back. I went to see Leonard Cohen. He was a criminal lawyer. Mm-hmm. They told me he'd be a good man to see. So he's got my story, and he said, well, that's good. He says, I'll get your job back for you. He says, but sometimes things don't work out that way, he says. But usually they do. So I told him, get me back. So when it come out, they didn't have to take me back because I waited over 6 months to expire. I forget what you call it.
So where'd you go after that?
After that, I went to the, oh wait a minute, where did I go from there?
You mentioned the Berkshire.
Computers. I went down to work at the Berkshire Computers in Lenox. And Andy Chimura was the one that ran that place. He was very good to me. He gave me work, and he was wonderful. They tell me he worked for about 2 years. He used to go to different places that had computers. And he worked day and night on them. He was a hard-working man. He was a self-made employer. And he was wonderful as far as I'm concerned.
Now your wife had quite a few years in GE too.
Yeah, she worked for a long time. She had 34 years service.
Now so obviously you did marry and have a family?
Yeah, we had two children, 2 sons, 5 years apart. Jackie was our firstborn. He was born in 1951, and Paul was born in 1956. And Jack is married now, and he got 3, 4 kids of them. He's in Las Vegas. And Paul never got married. He's been living in California for 30 years. He came home this year because my wife and I aren't getting along too good because we're crippled. We both walk with walkers. My wife spends some time in a wheelchair. So he came home to help us out.
Oh, that was good. Did you ever keep in touch with any of the buddies you were in the service with?
Yeah, I kept up with a couple of them, and there's one especially that I was close to, and his name was Elmer Schwartz, and he lived in Fremont, Indiana, I think.
You mentioned Ohio.
Ohio, Fremont, Ohio, that's what it is. We'd been out there, we went to their 25th running anniversary, and we kept up, and we've gotten apart the last few years, and I guess when you get older, you just lose it.
Yeah. Did you ever go to any reunions?
Yeah, we went down to Memphis, not Memphis, but Nashville, Tennessee. Is outside of Nashville, Tennessee.
Was it Knoxville?
Knoxville.
Yeah.
Knoxville.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went there with the Schwartz. We met there, and we spent 3 days there with them. We had a good time.
Did you see some of the guys that you were in with?
Yeah. Seen a lot of them.
Now, do you feel your service experience had a positive or negative effect on your life?
Positive. I mean, any way you look at it, it was for the best. I don't begrudge any part of it.
I imagine you got to see a lot of things.
There's things that you'd never do on your own.
Yeah. Well, Don, I know you have some photos and memorabilia that you'd like to show, so why don't we do that now?
Okay.
Okay, Don, here's the first picture. What is this of?
This is my brother, Frank, that was at the Army War College.
Uh-huh.
He was a first sergeant,
Yeah.
and that's where he became a great marksman with the pistol. Out of a 220 possible perfect score, he had a 218.
Wow.
And he had his picture in the paper all over the country in sports sections.
Yeah.
With guys like Nellie Fox, not Nellie Fox, but the fighter Fox was in there, and somebody else. And this is, I postcard I always sent to my sister.
And that's the war college there, isn't it?
No, that's not the War College. I don't know what that is.
Oh, okay.
And this is the money that we got overseas.
That's the mark, isn't it?
Marks, that's German mark.
Yeah.
Not worth anything to us, but just memories. And that's Marlene Dietrich that came over when the boys were parading, and she walked with them.
Uh-huh.
It was a big treat.
Yeah.
She was a great movie star at that time.
And that was a paper that was put out by the regiment, wasn't it?
Yeah, Prop Blast.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a 82nd Airborne. And that's my brother Frank. When I came home, we went to New York together. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
He was a great sergeant.
Now he retired out of the.
He retired. He had 23, 24 years and
Uh-huh.
all. Yeah. Then he worked in the GE for a while, and then he moved his son and his wife to St. Peter,
Down in Florida.
down in Florida, St. Petersburg.
Now who was that?
That's me. During the war, it was near the end of the war. We were out, had a couple of days off, and went with a couple of friends, and we took each
Is that
other's-
in Germany or Belgium?
Belgium.
Belgium.
Yeah. And that was an Allied airborne patch we could wear because it was Allied.
Uh-huh.
And what is this?
Well, we just showed this. That was your pay slip from.
Oh, that. Well, I worked 45 hours or 48 hours and got $45. And they still took money out.
Still took money out on you.
Not much, but that was just the beginning of it,
Yeah.
actually.
That was interesting to
Yeah.
see what you made back in those, 1947.
Yeah, but you could be surprised what $1 bought at that time.
Yeah. And these are
Hats.
ribbons, and
Yeah, this is the first hat they gave me after with the parachute on it.
uh-huh.
And that's Combat Infantryman's badge up on the right. And on the left is a Good Conduct Medal on the right.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle, and one of them is Eastern, the area we were in.
Theater campaign.
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah. Well, Don, we appreciate you taking the time to tell us your story, and for your service to the country and the courage that it took to do that. And we really appreciate you doing this with us.
Well, we thank all you for what you did for us.